All right, thank you guys. We are here, Three Comic Money, 3C, comic contributor chats here. We're here with Cavan Scott. Does that say right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. We've had a debate on whether or not that'd be right, and these guys told me that's the one to go with. So Cavan Scott, he amazingly, I did not know he was going to be writing the book that everyone knows he writes now. When I asked him to be on the show, I started reading this book called Shadow Service. It's by Vault Comics, and I was just intrigued. I thought it was a great story. I read the first 2 issues, so I was like, hey, I'd love to talk to him some more. I reached out to him, and then at the same time started doing the research and went, oh crap, he writes a new Star Wars book this about to come out that everyone's going crazy for. So we're going to talk Shadow Service, and hopefully he might talk to us a little bit about Star Wars, and also you look at his resume of books he's written, and you're going, I read that one, and I just did not realize, because sadly your first name doesn't show up on the books. It's just Scott a lot of times. So it's like, there's a bunch of Scotts out there, so sometimes you don't read the first name of some of the guys. So but I loved Shadow Service.
Oh, thank you.
My colleagues haven't had a chance to jump into it. I think it's just a great story.
You tried your ass off, though.
I tried. It's the second we got you, I'm like, okay, guys, you got to read this. And they're like, no, we're going to read Star Wars. And I'm like,
both Chris and I live in Tennessee, and we shop at similar shops. And I ran into him a couple of weeks ago at the shelves, and he pulled that book off the shelf and said, you have to read this. This is fantastic. Oh, and by the way, I think I'm going to try to get this guy on the show. And this, again, like this was long before High Republic, so he was geeking out over the other book. So he has tried. I just haven't gotten that far yet. I'm getting there.
That's good. That's good.
This is what I'm talking about here, guys. I forgot we can throw these covers up and sort of let you see what they look like. But Cavan, can you talk to us about like what gave you the idea for this book?
Sure. So Shadow Service has been brewing for years, absolutely years. As people can probably tell from my accent, I'm a Brit, and so I grew up in the 1970s where the world, my sort of pop culture world, was dominated by Star Wars, which is handy, Doctor Who, Hammer Horror, and all the things that tried to scare kids silly in the 1970s. Basically, 1970s TV for kids was just horror filled. It was everything from even like the adverts to stop people playing in streams were. We had this wonderful one over here when it was Donald Pleasance playing Death in an advert aimed at children to stop them playing in streams of woods. And it's basically him as the Grim Reaper going, oh yes, I wait for you to come and see me. And so
that's terrifying.
Yeah, exactly.
I want to see this.
And things like 2000 AD and all these things I was getting into, it was really, you know, horror was right up there, which explains a lot about the stuff I like and the stuff I write now. And obviously the other thing was James Bond, because I'm a Brit. I'm supposed to like James Bond. It's written into our constitution. So between that and the combination of things like Doctor Who, which had UNIT, which was a paramilitary organization that fought aliens and monsters that the Doctor worked with, I was always fascinated by these an idea of sort of a spy service that dealt with the supernatural and the monsters. There was another comic called Scream, which is real inside baseball stuff for British comics. Scream was published by the same people who did 2000 AD, and it was 2000 AD. If people don't know what 2000 AD is, it's a weekly science fiction comic. This was the weekly horror comic that went with it. And it didn't last that long, but it had a strip in it called The Dracula File, which was about a KGB officer defecting from Russia because he's found out that Dracula's come to Britain. And the Russians are all going, brilliant, let him deal with that. You know, the Dracula will infect the entire British Isles. And the KGB guy goes, no, we can't let that happen. That's really bad. And so he defects to find Dracula. And I love that strip. And so again, it was that thing of monsters and spies. And it's just always stayed with me. And then, yeah, years later, I came up with the idea of a series of stories about an agency called MI666. And couldn't really make it work. And so I've been coming up with these stories for years. I'd written versions of them in different short story collections and things in prose, and it wasn't really working. And then I was talking to Vault Comics, and we were talking about various things. And during the conversation, it all sort of just came together. And I went, hang on, if I take that character from that pitch I had over there, and I take this general idea of MI666, and then the new character, who's the central character, Gina, sort of came into it. It all came together, and so that's where it came from. So yeah, I feel like I've been researching this book since I was 10. So, you know, it's been a long time coming. So thankfully people are liking it, because it would have been a dreadful thing to spend 30 odd years working on an idea and then no one liking it.
I like it already. I haven't read a word of it, but it's
well, there you go. Go and read
like
it. Listen to your friend.
Yes,
yeah,
mine are on the way. They're in the mail.
It's the cocktail of my head. It's like everything that rattles around my head.
So you mixed in some Scream.
Yes.
Here.
Oh, there we go. Scream. See, the funny thing was last year, when we launched Shadow Service, Scream has now come back in the UK in the form of a Halloween special every year from 2018. And they asked me to finish the Dracula file because it never finished.
Oh, really?
Yes. And so it was just that really weird thing where it was I kept talking about it in interviews and no one knew what the Dracula file really was. And then I suddenly got a phone call out of the blue, completely unrelated, saying, "You like that strip, don't you? It was never finished. Do you want to write the last chapter?" And so it was just, it was one of those moments when it all came together. So,
nice.
So it was, that was a really bizarre thing. So yeah.
So has that been published? That's done already?
That's one of those. Yeah, it was one in that series. So there was 2 comic series in the, around that time. It was Misty, which was a horror comic for girls that was weekly, and there was Scream, which was the boys one, and now Rebellion own both of all the back catalogs, so they've been putting out these new ones bringing back the old characters. So yeah, that was last year.
I hate this show, Chris. I hate it. All it does is spend my money.
Yes.
Oh, tell me about it. So Scream, I bought Scream when I was a kid, and it was like 25p 10p a comic. The story is that my mum and dad hated me having it. They were really anti it because it had blood all over the cover. I mean, for a kid's comic, it was properly, bloodthirsty. So I hid them in my mate's den underneath his house down the road.
So not porn, scary horror movies.
It's horror comics. Yeah, exactly. I think that sums up my childhood. And so he had this little crawl space underneath. It was like something out of It. Crawl space under his house. And we used to have horror club over there. So we used to read horror, like Fangoria. We used to read horror comics. We used to read old paperbacks and stuff under there. And years later,
down there too, like not the story,
exactly.
The reading the crawl space.
Yeah, it was brilliant. We had lights. It was like, seriously, something was going to happen bad. And years later, he moved, I moved, and I suddenly realized that my box of Scream was still sitting under that house. And I've never gone back to go to the knock on the door and say, "Excuse me, can I crawl under your house, please?" So now I'm rebuying
magazines.
Exactly. And it's like every issue is like 20 quid now. And it's just like, no, they're under Mark's house. So,
well, and those magazines and those newspaper weeklies from the UK are so brittle from the 70s, and they're like to find a good condition one's so hard. Because
I mean, to be fair, they'll be mush by now.
Yeah.
And you also have different paper sizes, and we can't get bags and boards to fit any of the comics from Britain. So
all my Action Forces.
Yeah, so we have Action Force is the same size as the Star Wars ones from those years. They're like magazine size, but they're British magazine size, and they're a little taller than our magazine boards. So they're always sticking up out of the top, and they're really thin and all newsprint, and they're really fragile, like Chris said.
Rebellion have brought out editions of all these books. I think I could probably even put my hand on. So there's the Dracula File one, which is beautiful.
Ooh, yeah, that's awesome.
Look at that. But even though I have these, I have to still go back and buy the originals naturally. So, it's...
we understand that. We have the trades to read, and then we have our floppies that we keep in our boxes that we just stare at the beautiful. Of course, the art's just beautiful, and that's a lot of it. You can't a trade doesn't give you the art. I mean, when I look at your Shadow Service, I mean, did you have any art direction in that? Because like some of these covers are awesome.
It's the entire team. So when I write scripts, I usually put on the front of the script the solicitation for the issue and a couple of ideas for covers. Mainly because before I was writing fiction, I was a magazine editor, so I spent my life coming up with covers, and not for comic stuff, or some of it was, but mainly I spent my life in cover meetings, so I can't not put a cover idea through. So I put them on, and then Corin takes it away and twists it into something wonderfully freaky and so much better than my initial idea. But it is a proper team book, that, in the fact that everyone on the team puts their two penny thing about the covers, and the graphic style. when we first put the book together, I did a mock-up of loads of different sort of 1970s and 1960s pulp spy fiction covers, and a lot of the James Bond re-releases from the Fleming novels, and a lot of them have that kind of, you know, motif and character style. So that's where she got it from. And yeah, they're a delight. And so we've got the first run is 10 issues, and the 10 covers as a whole, we're trying to work out what we can do with them as well, because the covers are like posters. And hopefully it's going to, you know, continue beyond. So with more to come. But yeah, they are beautiful. Corin is just amazing. There are more monsters in Shadow Service now because of Corin, because even though I love monsters, I probably wasn't ramping up the monster content as much as I wanted to, and then I started to see her monsters, and yeah, and so we're now cramming as many demons in as we can.
So that explains, like, by the time you got to issue 5, like I was like, whoa, you're throwing in like I love the character development of the 666 team. Like, of course, you have I wish I had images to show this freaky master who is a kid who floats in. Like, I mean, you've seen it. I've seen that sort of imagery before, but he's freaky. But then the guy that you created that eats other people to become them or whatever. It's just like
Coil.
It's like, okay, zombie times 10. Like, it's so freaky how because because you end issue 5 with that sort of imagery. I'm like, what? You have to kill? Oh God, he eats a corpse, and now he's going to become this person.
So that was all there, but it was for those who've read it, and I know the other two will obviously read it now.
It's on the way. It's just mail has been delayed on my.
I'm actually. So if I look a little distracted, I'm ordering it right now.
Oh, excellent! This is good. This is good. There are these big skeleton statue things that appear through the series, which weren't in the script at all. And issue 2 was when one first appears. Corin just put it in, and so now they've become. That's one of them. Yeah. So now they've become part of the story, to the point that there was this is why I love working in comics, because there was a moment where I didn't actually know what a particular part of the mythos looked like, and then I realized that it's been literally staring me in the face when I go through pages, because she's been putting them in the back of all the pictures, and so it's going to look like we've planned it from day one, which is wonderful. But it was purely because I mean, we've got very similar tastes in horror. We've got very similar tastes in monsters. We are going as a little bit of a sneak peek. One of the future issues have them going to a demon strip club, where the demons are stripping off their skin to reveal their demonic side underneath. She has gone mental on that.
Wow, fantastic idea.
Because we keep thinking about what's the thing that you see in spy movies or you see in noir films, and how can we make it a bit more demonic? And so
Neil Gaiman, step aside.
Well, God, I would love that. I mean, Neil's one of my big heroes in life, because again, it's growing up in. I know it's not just us, but growing up in the 70s and 80s, horror was a massive part of all our lives as kids.
That's all I read was the Vertigo stuff. Hellblazer.
Yeah, exactly. And so stuff like Hellblazer. I mean, obviously there is a Constantine influence in Shadow Service, and I make no bones about that, because I love Constantine so much, and that entire sort of Swamp Thing, Vertigo. People say that Vault is sort of like a new version of Vertigo, and I think we're all very happy with that, and we will take that, whether it's true or not. We will take it, and we will put it on
it's a great line.
gravestones.
I hadn't heard of that, but that definitely makes sense. Like, just the books that Vault chooses to put out and the way they approach things. So you said that you and Vault had you already planned on writing a comic with Vault?
We were talking. So there was a couple of ideas, and I pitched something that was okay, but it didn't really fit. And so then we just started. So we went back, and we knew we wanted to work with each other. So then we went back, and it was just one of those conversations like, what do we both like? So it's Adrian, the editor there, and I think. So I was thinking along this way, and I went, well, what if it was Tinker Tailor Soldier Witch? And then he went, write that book.
Like that too.
So then I had to go, okay, what is that story? And that's the moment when I realized, and it was weird. It was one of those moments when I had this all going on in my head, and I was like, shit, I've got to come up with a story now. And I've sort of thrown all these elements. I've thrown, there's a ghoul that eats corpses so you can infiltrate places. There's a witch who's a spy, and nothing was working. And then I was listening to the Sabrina soundtrack from Chilling Adventures Sabrina, and there's a cover version of Black Magic Woman on it, and I was literally walking late at night. I think I've been to the cinema, and I came back walking home, and that played, and that's when I saw the character that became Gina, and it all just went, there it is. And so again, when I get back to write Shadow Service now, I listen to that track all the time, and that's her attitude, and that's how, you know, we know. And I played it to Corinne when she was designing the character as well.
They've done a brilliant job with that show too. I can see.
Oh, it's amazing.
Inspiring. I mean, I have become a Sabrina fanboy. I never thought I would care about Archie stuff, and I can't get enough of it now because of that show.
Some of the Archie horror stuff is just beautiful. I mean, the only problem is it has a habit of not ending. You know, so you know we've got Afterlife just sort of finished. The Hunger one they did with turning Jughead and stuff, and and the Sabrina. I mean, that's just beautiful. And the TV show, my eldest daughter, who's from 14, has just started watching it, but me and my wife have become addicted to it, you know. And let's face it, you couldn't have done that show on network telly because it's got blatant Satanists, you know. And I love it, and I love the fact of where they go with it, and they go, look, we're actually going here, and I think we're in the last season now, aren't we? So we've just started watching that, and they're going Lovecraftian now. So it's brilliant, and there's no art book. I want an art book of the Sabrina TV show because there's even little things that in their house they've got a wall of a single shoes, and it's the shoes of all their victims over the years, because that's old witch folklore that they steal a shoe. And so it's like there's loads of stuff. If you know witch folklore, and I've spent too much time reading about this shit, you see it and you go, like, all the images when they do their blackboards and they've got stuff, you go, oh god, that's that, and it's just thrown into the background. It's so clever.
I love that they use the hack artwork, the comic cover hack artwork for the intro. I thought that was a really nice nod to his stuff. And
then they've got a quick panel which is like with classic Sabrina,
the original,
well.
the original splash page. I love that.
And
from Madhouse 22. Yep.
No, it's a great show, and it's very much in keeping it. I was again writing Shadow Service when we were binging that, so you know there is an element of it's probably why it got darker very quicker again. But you know it's just such a great.
These guys, they're going to buy it now for sure.
Go for it.
I just bought it. I just got
told you it's on the way. I got here in time.
Well, you know, if I'm here to do plugs, which I am, issue 6 comes in March, and that's when we launch the next sort of arc in it, and that's when the trade's out as well. So hopefully, you know, it's gonna run and run. That's the plan.
You should have a quid of royalties coming your way from me.
That's what I like to hear.
So, but how did you? I mean, you told us like this is what you wanted to write, but you're not known as a witch doctor story writer. You've done Vikings, Transformers, the Star Wars. You were the IDW option guy or IP guy. Like, how did you
Transformers? Back to the Future.
Oh, there we go. Well, the funny thing is, I think I set out to write this stuff, and then because of the way the industry works, you write what you can, and so I became a middle grade, all age comic writer and prose writer, working on things. What it was, do you remember there was a show, a computer game called Skylanders, which had the little models, and you put them on the portal and they appeared. So just as I went freelance and left my magazine job, I'd been working on things like Doctor Who for a while, and Penguin Books over here were doing the Skylanders books. But before anyone knew what Skylanders was going to be a hit, they needed someone to turn around the kids' book really quickly. And I'd just gone freelance, so I was like, yeah, I'll do that. And I ended up writing about 25 to 30 of them, just churning them out. And because of that, I sort of got into that thing of I did lots of work on Angry Birds. I did lots of work on on things like Penguins of Madagascar, all that sort of that time of all these brands, and that sort of led me into IDW doing the Star Wars stuff, because again I got into Star Wars by writing middle grade because I was doing all this. So I became known to being the licensed all age middle grade guy, who secretly just wanted to turn everything into horror, and that's sort of it was actually Vader's Castle was the perfect way of doing this, and
well, then, you did good because you chose Frank Avila to do your freaking art covers, and I'm like, oh my god.
I mean, to be fair, I'd love to take credit for that. I can't. Oh. That was completely Mike Seglain. I mean, Mike Seglain at Lucasfilm is another massive horror fan. I mean, that's how we got to know each other. We met obviously working on Star Wars. We started talking about Hammer and Universal, and then sort of forgot to talk about Star Wars, and brought the conversation back round, because obviously in Star Wars you have the two great horror icons of Peter Cushing and Christopher Lee, and we were at a con in San Diego saying about what they should have had a story with Tarkin and Dooku. You know, I mean, there's a chance in Clone Wars, but they sort of missed that. That we know of, but you know, and we started riffing on the story that what if Tarkin found a clone of Dooku, and then that would make Tarkin Baron Frankenstein and Dooku would be the monster, and that's what spun into Vader's Castle. And we weren't allowed to do that story, but we sort of did a version of it later when we came back for the second series of it, and so that's why in the first series of Vader's Castle, Dooku becomes a vampire, because and we got Kelly Jones to draw it, you know, and Kelly's a massive Hammer fan, so he didn't use any references from Star Wars. Every reference he used in that entire that story is a Hammer still, and it really shows in the best possible way. And so again, it was like, that was me saying, let's see how I can push the all age, how I can push it into horror without losing the all age thing. Because again, growing up over here, we had things like the Fighting Fantasy Choose Your Own Adventure books, which, you know, were horrendous. And we all just lapped it up. So I wanted to do something about that, to the point that some of my editors were going, are you sure kids can read this stuff? And I was sending them the stuff from my youth going, it hasn't done me any damage.
I don't know, you're writing it, so.
Yeah. But yeah, so Vader's Castle, we didn't know Vader's Castle was going to work. We didn't know people were going to love it. I mean, I was getting away with anything I could. It was you know, shall I, you know, can I do with the Wicker Man with Ewoks? They're going to say no. Oh no, hang on, they've said yes. Okay. Can I turn Dooku into a vampire? Can I possess the ghost? You know, all these things. And then when they came around and said, right, let's do it again, it was like, so now I can do Frankenstein, can't I? And they were like, yeah, go on then. So I love what you just
did. Did you have anything to do with the release of the new slipcase box set with the Virgin covers?
Well, yeah. Well, other than the fact that I knew they were doing it, yeah. But
that's beautiful. That's the way I just. I mean, no, not that I didn't think you knew, but I mean, was that partially your idea, or
no? It wasn't my idea. That was IDW. IDW are so good at packaging this stuff now.
It's a beautiful set.
Yeah, it's lovely. I feel really bad because people have brought me, when we could still do cons, people brought that to me with the blank one and saying draw something, and I'm like, really? You sure you want me to do it? But yeah. No, it's beautiful. That's fantastic. We've just done the hardcover of it, which collects the first two as well, which is a good book. But yeah, so we had another one. We had a special last year, and if you read the last page of that, you know that there's something coming in the future. So Vader's Castle isn't going away, which is just, again, mind blowing, because it was supposed to be a one-off, and it was when we were sitting in San Diego and we showed the picture of the zombie Ewoks, and the entire panel went berserk, and we were like, oh, perhaps we've got something here. Yeah.
Well, it's sort of nice just to have an almost Elseworlds for a Star Wars fan to have something that's just fun. It's I mean, Star Wars people, I mean, obviously you know this because you're a Star Wars people. I mean,
careful.
These guys are. I am probably the least Star Wars out of this entire 4-person square. And I love Star Wars, but it's like they are everything has to be exactly how it was originally was. If it's not, but you were able to do an Elseworld story, not where people get excited about it. I love the covers. I love some of the books. To be honest, I haven't read them all. So when you're talking about the different things, I read this one, and crap, I don't think I read the right order to know which way.
I mean, I do see them. It's sort of the treehouse of horror for Star Wars. I mean, that's how I look at that book. And when you get into the tricky world of canon, we like to say that all those stories happened. They might not have just happened in that way. So because they're basically fireside tales, you know, these are the horror stories that people tell around the fire on Tatooine or whatever. So yeah, all the things happened, but they might not necessarily be in that order. Or, you know, there is no... Dooku probably did turn into a vampire for a bit, but, you know, that might have been exaggerated, you know. Is there such a thing as Wergamorians? Well, there should be, so there are in our story.
It's kind of like, for those, you were saying, I'm roughly the same age as you, I think, based on what you said earlier, and growing up in the late 70s, early 80s with those comics from Marvel, which are completely off the wall.
Oh yeah,
I think there's the two sides of Star Wars fans, right? It better be exactly right. You better not screw up a single detail, or it better be so outlandish that I don't have to worry about whether it fits into anything else. Yeah. So I think the Vader's Castle works on that level.
So my Star Wars begins with Star Wars Weekly from Marvel UK. Before I saw a film, I read the first appearance of Jackson in it. So for me, I was like, when Empire came out, I was like, well, where's the bunny?
Where's the
because I couldn't work out, because I reread those issues so much that I read Jackson before I read Luke, because so he was such a big part of my fandom. And then I suddenly realized that everyone hates him. So obviously, as soon as I got to work in Star Wars, I tried to change that. And I have been on a crusade to get Jackson into everything. And largely that's working as well. It's definitely gone into a different kind of universe now these days. But yeah, I mean, I could not honestly see why no one had a problem with the Admiral being a fish, but everyone had a problem with a smuggler being a rabbit. You know, so that was always my argument. And in last year's Empire Strikes Back anthology, from a certain point of view, they let me do a Jackson story with Jackson Orlando, and I got him to say, he's a fish. What's wrong with this? Because it doesn't make no sense that, you know, people go, well, you can't have a rabbit, but you can have...
I've never thought of it in those terms before, and I can't unsee that now.
But he's green, that's why. It's the color. If he'd been a different color, he'd been okay.
Yeah. Okay, I'll give you that. He's a little bit 70s luminous, you know. Again, music's really important when I write these things. So whenever I write Jackson, you know, there's that Mecco Star Wars single.
Oh my God, the disco one?
Yeah. So
that thing's
Jackson.
awesome.
In my head, that's Jackson's theme. So whenever I write Jackson, I play that at the beginning of the day. Because if there was ever a Jackson TV show, that would be the theme tune.
Chris is like, what are you guys talking about? And then here I am, like, I own 2 copies.
No, I'm just thinking through, like, since you said, of course, being UK and everything, like, we've all gotten into trying to collect the Empire State weeklies or whatever, and like the original, but the last few issues that are only UK original stories, you have the Paul Neary's Death Ship and some of those. I'm like, those are so dark. And like, when I'm thinking of Star Wars going dark, I mean, I don't know if you read that issue where
many times.
That thing it's a gorgeous cover for one thing, but it's also one of the scariest for a Star Wars story.
And weird. It was Alan Moore's Star Wars story. It's the weirdest thing in the world. I mean, what I'm really glad is that they did got it down here. They did a British when they did the omnibuses. They did a British one as well, so you got that as well. And yeah, the influence again coming back to Shadow Service. The influence of 2000 AD is huge in those. You know, so and so the funny thing to get back to what we were originally talking about, I did sort of fall into this kind of thing, and even now I write for 2000 AD, but I write their all age stuff, which is crazy. And again, I try and push it as much as possible. I've written Judge Anderson for them and Rogue Trooper for their all age stuff, but I've pushed it as far as I can because for me growing up, 2000 AD was all ages, you know, and it was absolutely horrifying at the same time, and faces were getting melted off. And Rogue Trooper is one of the greatest war comics in the world, which was read by kids. So, you know, I didn't have to do too much work to make Rogue Trooper work. But yeah, so it was. You know what comics is like? You get buttonholed, you know, you get pigeonholed or something. So it was a bit of a. I think Shadow Service has been great for me because I could show people and go, look, this is what actually set out to do. And I've ended up doing all this other stuff, which I love. And don't get me wrong, I will never complain about writing comics that kids can read, because we need kids to read comics. So, you know, and that's been the great thing with Star Wars Adventures, is that people have come up and said, you know, I've been reading this with my kids. They're now reading the Marvel stuff because they've sort of aged up as well. And they're now reading Marvel and DC, and they're reading all these other things as well, which is exactly what happened to us when we were young. And thankfully the industry's cottoning on to it, that, you know, we need kids to read comics, so we need comics for kids, because that's how it works. But yeah, but I will naturally turn everything as dark as I can get away with, even to the point of the High Republic. I started writing that book, and I said to Mike, "You do realize I'm writing a horror book, don't you?" And he went, "No, you're not. The High Republic isn't a horror book." And about 3 issues in, I got an email from him going, "Yeah, it's a horror book, isn't it?" I was like, "Yeah." I've done it by stealth. So, because, you know, what better than coming up with a glorious, shining, glittering version of the Jedi and then throwing them into the worst possible situation they can be in?
But how did you go from, you got, IDW has their High Republic book, but Marvel has theirs, but yet you're not the IDW High Republic guy. You're the Marvel High Republic, and that one Chewbacca book that you came out to. But how did you get put on the Marvel versus the IDW?
Well, so what happened was, I was invited along with the other 4 authors to take part in what became the High Republic. So you know, they got us over to Skywalker, which was incredible, for basically Camp Star Wars, and we came up with loads of story ideas, and one of them became the High Republic. And so the 5 of us sort of tasked with bringing it to life. And again, this is all, I have to take my hat off to him. It's all Mike Seglain, because he chose the 5 of us, and he knew what our strengths were, but then he didn't play to them as such, you know. So he put Daniel, who's a prose writer, on the IDW comic. You know, he put Charles Soule, who obviously is a successful novelist, but is known for writing comics. He wrote the first Del Rey novel, and then people expected me to be writing the IDW comic, because I was the main writer on Adventures. I went in absolutely wanting to write the Marvel comic and made that my campaign from day one, but you know, we didn't actually have a choice on what our assignments were. We all came up with the story together, and we were working on it for a long time before we got our assignments. So we were working generally on the story, which then would go on to become the books and the comics. And then a 1.5 years into the process, that's when we were given our assignments, and you know, which parts that we were going to do. And because we're all doing more than one thing. So I've been writing the Marvel comic, I've written the second Del Rey novel. Justine wrote the first middle grade. She's written the second YA, and she's working on the manga as well. So we've all moved around, and we've all sort of a chance to tell.
It's a fantastic setup the way you guys have it. It is fascinating.
I agree. And how interlocked are they? Is it necessary to read it all? I mean, I assume you know the grand plan. Obviously, you can't spoil the grand plan, but
I mean, I hope it's people do read them all, because, you know, that's how it's been designed. But we have tried to make it as easy as possible to read. I just read about, if someone just wants to read YA, they can read the YA books. You know, if someone wants to read the middle grade books or the kids' books, they can just read those. But we have tried to do it that, you know, if you read them all, you get. To be fair, we've looked at comic crossovers. Again, most of us in that room, if we didn't write comics at the beginning, most of the people in the room, actually all of them now, have written comics. I think when we started, me and Charles were the only 2 that had written comics. I think Claudia was starting to write the House of L for DC, or was talking to them about the House of L. But we all come from a comic reading background, so immediately we started talking about Secret Wars and Crisis, and just those massive, you know, things again that started with Secret Wars 2, when you had the massive crossovers. And for me, again, we go back to the Marvel UK runs. The Secret Wars weekly blew my mind, because I was a Marvel UK fan, but I never realized up to that point how interlocked the Marvel U was, because, you know, they didn't perhaps reprint everything. So, you know, seeing that first issue of Secret Wars and seeing the Fantastic Four standing by the Avengers, standing by, you know, Spider-Man, and the X-Men, it blew my mind. And then that weekly was amazing for a young comics fan, because what they did was They went through Secret Wars, and then they went into Secret Wars 2, and they would print the issue of Secret Wars 2. Then they would print the issue of Power Pack. Then they would print the Secret Wars issue 3, and then they would print Iron Man.
You got the entire connected story if you follow
exactly. And they edited some of the things so you wouldn't lose, you know, if there was ongoing stuff that was in the original runs. But then sometimes they would say, well, we're not going to be able to just jump straight into that issue of like the Sentinel armor for Iron Man. We need to go back a couple of issues so readers know. So it was like a primer for the entire Marvel universe. And weirdly, the backup strip was Alpha Flight. And so there is an entire generation of Marvel fans who Alpha Flight is more important than the Avengers, because we read that story before we actually knew what Avengers stories were, you know. So, and so yeah, we went back and talked about that, and then obviously every event that's happened since, you know, and that idea of if you read it all, you'll get the entire picture, but you can read, you know, temples and get, you know, a story. We're hoping, obviously, the hope is that if you read the comic and you don't usually read the books, you might go, oh, I'll pick up one of the books, or, you know, and we've had people who've never read haven't read a children's book for years, and now they've picked up the middle grade because they've, you know, some of the characters follow through. You've got to be careful. You don't want to bankrupt people as well. And you don't want people to go, oh, there's too much, I can't follow it. So it's trying to get the balance.
I do appreciate, though, with this High Republic or whatever, I don't have to know a lot of lore. I don't have to know, like, I can pick up the High Republic novel and I can read it, and I don't have to know, I don't have to read Timothy Zahn's 1,200 books or Kevin J. Anderson's books or whatever. I can just read.
But you should.
Republic. Yes, I have read. You should read definitely some of those, but you don't have to, because those things are sometimes a beast to try to track down, because libraries have checked out. They're used books. They're $20 as a used book, and you're just like, okay, wait a minute, I just want to read a story. But I can pick up High Republic, read that, and be fine. There's character, but you also bring in enough of the characters from the, or characters that look like characters from the movies. Like, because I know Yoda's a part of it, and different ones. And you have, Pete had the kids book that you did with Chewbacca. I don't know if it's Chewbacca or just say Wookiee.
No. Different character.
Different character.
So, well, there's the thing too, where you have a new fan base for Star Wars that started with Clone Wars, and they got their new movies. They got their sequel movies that, you know, essentially what we had as the original trilogy when we were kids, and now here they are with their movies and their cartoon, but they have no comics, or this is their jumping off point for their literature.
Well, that's exactly the point. You know, it's let's face it, it's a dense universe, and I was a Star Wars fan through the sort of wilderness years of no films, but so many comics and books, and to the point that I couldn't keep up with it. You know, I read a majority of the Dark Horse comics, but I just didn't have time to read all the books, and I'm now going back and filling in the gaps of the ones I haven't read, and so we really wanted it to be that point where you could read. You have a general interest in Star Wars, and you've watched the films. You might have seen Rebels. You might be watching the Mandalorian, and here's a new chance to delve into something without having to get the encyclopedias that I have behind me on the shelf, because that's our job, you know. And then hopefully for the long-term fans, and whether that's a fan who became a fan with new Disney canon, or someone who has been reading the EU for as long as it's been around, or pre-Timothy Zahn fiction as well, we sprinkle in enough references. So if you don't know what they are, they don't mean anything. I think there's one in issue 2 which came out today, where one of the Skier, the Trandoshan Jedi, swears an ancient Jedi name, which will mean nothing to most people, but people who know a certain book will go, oh, that's that thing from the EU. And that's what, I mean, let's face it, Star Wars has been doing that since well, let's face it, you know, we all sat through that first film, and Obi-Wan was going, oh, when I was a Jedi Knight in the Clone Wars, and you're like, what now? The what how, why, what? And we didn't know what that was, and we didn't know what that meant, but it sounded the coolest thing in the world. And it was only through the entire original films, we didn't really know what a Jedi looked like, other than Obi-Wan and Luke. And so then everything came afterwards. So Star Wars has been brilliant at doing that thing of going, you know, dropping in naming planets and names and insults that Leia gives Han, and then later filling in what that actually means. And so it means that you have the ability, when you write this expanded fiction, to do that naturally, because people expect it. And yeah, and there are always new generations. I'm an old school fan, so I would love that some old fans come with us as well. But you know, we don't want to get into the entire arguments of the Star Wars fandom, but I try and put enough stuff in there that, you know, that people realize that we love this stuff, you know, while also making it new. Like for my kids, you know, I got 2 daughters. Their introduction was Rebels. I could not get them to watch Star Wars. I tried to get them to watch Star Wars. They were not interested in Star Wars. And then one day they came into the kitchen and went, "Dad, come and see this. Is this that Star Wars you like?" And it was the first episode of Rebels, which was on whatever, it was on Cartoon Network or something, or no, Jetix probably. And I went, "This is probably the most Star Wars thing I've seen in years. Yes, what is this?" And we ended up watching it together. And they became Star Wars. I mean, my eldest is now at that point where she loves Mandalorian, but she loves a lot of other things as well. My youngest, her room is a shrine to Chewbacca. And I think she wishes Chewbacca was her dad. And I keep telling her, he's a rubbish dad. He disappears for decades and Lumpy hasn't seen him for ages. But she won't listen to me.
So wait, is that why you wrote that book that Pete held up? You wrote it for your daughter?
No, one of the reasons, as soon as I knew there was going to be a Wookiee Jedi, I had to write that. You know, put him in the
holiday special may not be canon for Star Wars fans, but it's canon for 3CM folks.
Well, of course, as we announced last week, I've co-written the Life Day Treasury of short stories, which which comes out later this year, and may delve into some of the holiday specials.
Oh, the Lego holiday special was the Lego. Did you watch the Lego one?
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, so good. So good. So many good things in there.
And again, I've been fighting to do a Christmas book for Star Wars. But I'm basically just going, I want to tell stories of Chewie's family, please. Thank you. And and also with that book, we're telling stories like ghost stories from Alderaan. We're telling, you know, we're doing that entire. We have an Ewok story, which is basically the Ewoks version of the Krampus. What's that? You know, so again, it's a kid's book, but it's supposed to be a family book, so there's horror in there as well, because
because you're there.
So sad. It's not sad, it's actually what I do. But yeah, again, Christmas is supposed to be for ghost stories. It's literally in the song.
Yeah.
They say,
come on, Dickens, all the way back to Dickens. Let's come on now.
Exactly. So yeah, how did we get to this point? Oh, yes, it's the inside of my head.
So, I mean, we'll run through just some of the. I mean, thank you so much for joining us. We're talking Shadow Service. I'm glad we sold these 2 guys on reading it. Hopefully, we sold people that are watch it, that they'll check it out. Mainly just because we get to see the horror side of you. And now I'm going to read these Star Wars books, knowing the guy who wrote it really likes scary stuff. So let's see how scary.
So where is it? It's got to be in here somewhere.
But I do have to ask. There's a book coming out, I believe, next week for DC that you had a part in. Is that right?
Oh, yes. Yeah.
This thing here?
Valentine special. Yeah, there we go.
So is it a horror story in there, judging by the cover?
No, that one's not actually. So that one's a Hawkman and Hawkwoman story. Has it got horror element? Well, it's got an Egyptian tomb. So actually, thinking about it, let me just check. Well, they do creep. So you see Hawkman and Hawkwoman in their various incarnations. And so they are breaking into an Egyptian tomb, but you don't actually see any monsters in that part.
It's a love story, right? I mean, it's the Valentine's Day special.
Yeah. As far as you get, but that means there has to be fighting because it's DC.
Oh.
And actually, there's a mummified monster in it. So there we go.
Yeah. So you got that coming out. You of course have High Republic came out this week.
Yeah.
You're doing this too. The Back to the Future Transformers. That I don't know what issue. This is issue 1. This is everyone wanted this cover because it's this toy that Pete actually showed us earlier. He actually has the toy. But what issue is this on?
So there has been a delay on that one because of when you write in a licensed comic, it has issues anyway because it has to go through so many people. Mm-hmm. When you're writing a licensed mashup comic, You have to go through 2 lots of people, and then the world stops, and entire companies get put on furlough, and so there has been a delay. So issue 2 came back a while back. Next month, issue 3 and 4 will be coming out to finish it off, and that was just. I mean, we were all a bit heartbroken by it, but it was just the way the world worked for a bit, and so we were all fit. It was just getting stuff approved. So yeah, we're halfway through that. It was again one of those things when they said, "Do you want to do this?" And I was like, "Well, that doesn't make any sense." Oh, actually, it really does, because no, actually, it works completely. And so I always say I want my to-do list to be the same as it was when I was 10. So having Transformers and Back to the Future in there really works.
Nice.
Yeah, I think I keep the horror stuff for the minimum on that, but there's a little bit.
There's no like zombies, DeLoreans walking around, and
you might see Megatron's skull at one point.
Okay.
And then you have the Rising Storm coming in the summer.
Yes. June, end of June. So that's the second Del Rey novel of the High Republic initiative, and so that's written, and I can't really say anything about that.
Yeah, looking forward to it though. Definitely looking forward to it.
Cool.
Damn, something I could get you to slip. We should have done this at night. Well, no, it is his night. Weird.
Yeah, it is nice. 8 o'clock in the evening.
Right? I'm really tired. A couple drinks, and then maybe
I should be on the whiskey.
Loved after it drops. It'd be great to have you back on and chat about it once you can talk about it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, it's half the problem with all this stuff. It's so nice to even be able to talk. We've been working on the High Republic for nearly 2.5 years now, probably more than that, and so majority of that time it's been secret. It's even not been known. It was under that appalling period when we just had a code name that we could talk about, where we couldn't talk about anything else, which infuriated us so much.
Blue Harvest, Horror Beyond Belief.
This one was Project Luminous. So they announced it was Project Luminous, and it was just that entire, and it was it was great, and it got people talking. But there was also we're just going, look, can we just talk about it, please? So now we can talk about it, and we don't actually know what we can say and what we can't, because there is the worry that we're just going to go blah, 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 and just say everything because we spent so long. It was funny when we first announced that it was even a thing at Celebration in Chicago. We did a panel, and they announced that we just did a writers panel. No one knew it coming to the panel we were going to announce anything. It was just 5 writers talking, and then they suddenly threw a picture of us up on the back at Skywalker Ranch, and then we said we're doing this thing between the 5 of us. It's coming out in 2020, which was now, and we know, a lie because the end of the world, and it's called Project Luminous. They whisked us off that stage, and we went on to, if you've ever seen footage from Celebration or you've been to Celebration, they usually have the Star Wars show going on in the middle, and they bring stars on and writers and all kinds of things into a mosh pit of Star Wars fans. And so we were pulled off this thing where we could finally say some words that were connected to what we were doing, and put onto a stage with microphones and no PR people around us. And Mike was terrified that we would just go, and here's what happens in year 3. Because it was just like, because we were just in that stage, we can talk about everything. And he was in the background going, don't say a word.
And that was in the exhibit, and that was in the exhibitor hall too. It was that platform in the exhibitor hall.
Yeah.
I was there.
Yeah.
And
which is weird. It's just
bring people up.
Thing. I do a lot of conventions, but actually, you literally have a mosh pit in front of you of Star Wars fans who are, because
you're up high, right? I mean, it's
and they've been kept there for 3 hours, and they've been bribed with T-shirts, and you can tell they're all going a bit stir crazy, and anything you say, they're like yes. Basically, and so it was the energy in that room was insane, and so we were all a bit confused, and now so now I think every one of us has had something out as of today. So Daniel's comic from IDW was the last thing of the first wave that's out. But we're still a little bit of like, what can I say and what can't I say? And
so did you guys know, like, okay, in Kylo Ren, we're gonna have a hologram like Phantom Menace, and that's gonna be alluding to this High Republic world, or did you guys already know that was planned, or like?
No, because when that was Charles, that was the good thing is what we were doing is, because while we were planning this, we were writing other Star Wars. So pitched 5 different versions of what became the High Republic, and one was the High Republic, and even that wasn't quite what it is now, but there was these other 4 things. And at that time I was writing the Dooku Jedi Lost audio play drama thing, and in that there are references to all 5 pitches, because I didn't know which was going to be made, but because of the way my brain works, I wanted to put Easter eggs in also, so it would be the first time any of the stuff was mentioned. So when it's on Wikipedia,
it was my idea. It was me.
So if you go onto Wikipedia and you look at High Republic age, it says first mention Dooku Jedi Lost. Meanwhile, Charles is doing the same. Charles is doing the same in Kylo Ren. Claudia's doing the same in Master and Apprentice, and so we were all out Easter egging each other. And so that Charles has the Operation Starlight in the Marvel run, you know. So we were working all this stuff because that's been the joy of doing it. Because we also write other Star Wars, we could start putting those Easter eggs in. And so, so there's been Easter eggs there's been some Easter eggs in Vader's castle that people haven't noticed yet, or people don't even know about, because it relates to stuff that hasn't happened yet. So
that stuff's always fun. It's always fun to have stuff to go back to.
Exactly. Now Topher doesn't have to do his research now. You just answered his biggest burning question. Where's the first mention of anything High Republic? Here it is.
First mention is in there's loads of mentions in Dooku. There's loads of things. And also there's stuff then which has become retroactively linked to the High Republic. So other stuff we've done since, we've gone, we can do this. And also beyond the 5 of us, because the 5 of us are working on it. But then you've got Dr. Aphra is currently excavating High Republic artifacts and things like that. So it's been great to see it sort of like trickle out as well. And likewise, we're seeing other stuff in the other comics and the other books, and we're going, we can have that, and pulling that in. You know, walking around Batu and going, that could be High Republic. And so it's things like that, and that's what makes all of these. But it's the old comic universe tricks, you know. It's going back and retrofitting stuff and putting stuff in. It's what DC and Marvel have been doing for, you know, literally decades. And so we've taken all our lessons from there, and if you're going to learn from people, learn from the best.
And it's really fun. It is really fun for the new generation of fans too. I mean, I've got a almost 2-year-old. He knows like 20 words, and 2 of them are Soka and Grogu. So he's on board already, and this will be the stuff he reads. So
look at the MCU is just literally the Marvel universe put on a screen. So there you go, do that, and then do that over there. And so for my kids, we're watching WandaVision, and then they immediately go onto YouTube, and there's like a 40 Easter eggs in episode 3 or that kind of thing. And for me, it's like it's like ambrosia from the gods, because now I've got my 11-year-old talking about Avengers storylines from the 80s when she has no interest in reading comics. So now it's my job to make her read those comics. But she's getting the Easter egg thing now. And also obviously within the MCU, when she realized that character was in that movie, but as a different actor, you know, it's all that stuff going on. And I'm seeing in her the exact things that have led to me. So the poor kid. But it's the way the brain, you know, our brains work as comic geeks and collectors. It just feeds into it. And so I think the MCU is just genius, because it's all it is doing it again, but in a different media. And so and now the trick is to get people to go back and read the comics as well.
That's, man, I'm sitting going, okay, crap, how do I make sure that I get the Francavilla cover that's all like that? I need to go read all of your IDW books just to see when is this. Okay, now I need to read. Okay, now I'm gonna have to have them side by side. When is this word? Does it appear in this issue?
But see, that's what's great. You don't have to do that though. You can do that. It'll be a little bit more rich, but you don't. But that's the great thing, right? Is that we don't have to know all that stuff. It's just fun if we do.
It's Cy Spurrier always says, and I thank him for this because I can steal it, that an Easter egg should never be there to beat someone around the head. An Easter egg is a reward for knowing something. And likewise, it should never be something when you feel left out because you haven't realized it's an Easter egg. It should never be that moment where it's so obviously an in-joke that you don't know. Again, it's like little things like in WandaVision, when you realize that the registration numbers are the issue numbers of the first time Vision appeared, you know, and things like that. So it's those little moments as well. It's putting all those little things in that if you have been a long-term fan and you have that kind of brain, you get it and you feel glad, you know, because it makes you part of the gang. It makes you part of the group.
Yep.
But for like my wife, who loves stuff like this but doesn't want to get into all the references and all the you know, stuff like that, it just goes completely overhead, and she loves the story, you know.
Yeah.
Yep.
What's the other one I loved? Oh, in Heroes, I think number plates, I always look at number plates because, again, that's how I work. And in Heroes, when oh god, who played Sulu? His name's gone out of my head.
George Takei.
Oh, it's Takei, yeah. When he turns up in Heroes, his registration number is the Enterprise's registration number.
1701.
Yeah. And so it's all those things where you can see if you know, but it doesn't affect you. So yeah, my wife she didn't even know. She wasn't a Star Trek fan. I have made her one over the years, but not to the point that, you know, she realized it was Sulu, but she didn't then notice that his car had the same registration number as the Enterprise, and would hate if she ever did.
I've realized what you've made me do during this day today. You've made me strip off my skin and reveal my nerd demon to the world. Thank you for that.
Hey, surely on a show like this, everyone knows that anyway, because it's what we
nothing to be ashamed of here.
No, exactly. There's no geek shame at all.
No, none.
Embrace it.
Well, thank you. Man, I'm sitting go. We could sit and talk for a long time about geeking out, but at the same time, I know I don't want you to get in trouble with the masters of Disney and Star Wars, because if we keep pulling, we might pull more information out of you. But got Shadow Service. So you say issue 6 is coming out next week? No,
next month. So March, yeah, and then the next run is issue 6 to 10, and then after that, it's a case of let's see how the book goes. But yeah, so it's been really well received so far. We're doing a bit of a sort of relaunch with Vought do that thing when they leave a couple of months between arcs, so people can take time to read other comics as well. Yeah, and then also it means that come March, if you haven't read any of it, you can pick up the trade, and so in one hit, you can pick up the trade and then get the next part. So I think it's a really good model. So we're doing that. So we're doing a bit of a sort of soft relaunch with that issue. Exactly the same story. It's continuing through, but it's like it's a good jumping on point. We in that one we've seen MI666 working in Britain. Now we're doing that thing where in a James Bond movie he gets his mission and he goes off to in the case of Shadow Service they go to Rome. So and Corin has killed herself by drawing lots of detail. If you've ever follow Corin's Twitter feed, her background she puts into everything. The backgrounds are immense, and the detail she puts in. And I'm constantly putting in the script, please don't kill yourself. And every time he really does. And I knew when I said we're going to Rome, I knew the fountains she would be drawing, and yeah, they're incredible. So, so yeah, it starts a bit of a travel log from that one when you start going around Europe.
Okay. Yes, thank you so much for joining us. Once again, guys, this is 3 Comic Money comic contributor chats. We're just sitting there. We're shooting the bull of Cavan Scott. Of course, you're reading High Republic, because everyone is. It's a great Star Wars book, and I'm excited about the novel coming out. But also check out Shadow Service. If he didn't sell you on it, believe me, Mike and Pete will tell you how good it is when they get their copies that they just ordered. And it is a good story, and a lot of times Vault is having some great stuff. Scout has some great stuff. Source Point. Check out some of those smaller indie publishers for what they're doing, but evidently IDW has some great horror books that are not sneaky horror books that Cavan's written that you need to check out, because he's sneaking in some of these mummies and some vampire dooku's and different things into his books that you need to check out as well. But yes, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me. I mean, this is fun. This is what you want to do. You want to sit and talk comics, and so
exactly.
It's been good. Great.
Well, thanks so much for your time. Hopefully we'll catch up with you again soon.
Hope so.